Welcome everyone to the Lofi Poli Sci podcast. I'm your host Michael Pickering, and that's right, Lo-Fi as in low fidelity, low quality, in your face, messy as can be global news show. Here we're going to talk about that famous question: what's going on in the world today? It's Tuesday, Lo-Fi Nation, and you know what that means. It's time for that Tuesday Top 10 list. Every Tuesday from now on, we'll be covering and looking at global indicators and surveys to see what countries hold the top 10 rankings in particular categories. We'll cover things like GDP, GDP per capita, HDI, GINI, largest populations, largest countries by size, happiest countries, and many, many more. And if you're unsure what some of those things mean, no worries, Lo-Fi listeners. We'll cover what each of them mean before we jump into the list. Today's top 10 list is a comparative analysis of two top 10 lists. I know, what a treat for you on this fabulous Tuesday that we get two lists at the same time. Our comparative analysis today focuses on GDP and GDP per capita. So often we hear discussions about the largest economies in the world being the US and China. But how do people know they are the largest economies in the world? The short answer, Lo-Fi Nation? They're using what's known as gross domestic product numbers, better known as GDP. But let's start by talking about what exactly is GDP, and then add the per capita to it. The World Bank definition of gross domestic product, or GDP, is: GDP is the sum of gross value added by all resident producers in the economy, plus any product taxes, and minus any subsidies not included in the value of the product. It is calculated without making deductions for depreciation of fabricated assets or for depletion and degradation of natural resources. Data are in current US dollars. Well, thank you so much, World Bank, for making that so much clearer for us. No, really. Let's simplify before we justify the usage. It's all about the goods and service your country sold and made. It's a measure of how much money your country has made, the people of the country and the government, in a single calendar year. It's a measure of the size of your economy using dollar amounts. That's it, Lo-Fi Nation. Not complex. GDP per capita is simply that number divided by the country's population. So it provides an average of about how much money each person theoretically makes in the country. We'll discuss this more further down the line, for sure. Now, there are other types of these indicators, meaning you can add purchasing power parity, commonly called PPP. And you could also use GNI, which is gross national product, or gross national income. But we'll save those for a different day and just keep it simple with GDP and GDP per capita for now. And now, let's get to that moment we've all been waiting for, the list. Starting with GDP and number 10. Quick side note, all numbers are rounded for ease of use. So GDP 2018 World Bank data. Coming in at number 10, Canada at $1.7 trillion a year in 2018. Number 9, Brazil at 1.8 trillion. Number 8, Italy at 2 trillion. Number 7, India at 2.7 trillion. Number 6, France at $2.77 trillion a year. Number 5, the United Kingdom at $2.8 trillion. Number 4, Germany at $3.9 trillion. Number 3, Japan at $5 trillion. Number 2, China at 13.6 trillion. Though technically the EU, because it's a single market, although not included in this list because it is not a country. The EU's 2018 GDP was $18.8 trillion. And at number 1 is the United States at $20.5 trillion in 2018. Now, going right into our list of GDP per capita 2018 World Bank data. Side note, I'm only including countries in this list. I am not including cities like Macau, which would be number 4, but it is not a country. And I am also only including countries that have 2018 World Bank data. Coming in at number 10, the United States at $63,000 a year in 2018 per person. Number 9, Singapore at $65,000. Number 8, Qatar at $69,000. Number 7, Iceland at $73,000. Number 6, Ireland at $79,000. Number 5, Norway, $82,000. Number 4, Switzerland at $83,000. Number 3, Luxembourg at $116,000 per person per year. Number 2, Liechtenstein at $165,000. And at number 1, Monaco, $185,000 a year per person in 2018 by the World Bank standards. And that's our to list. Now, some comparative perspective. Firstly, using GDP, you can see how people come to the conclusion about the richest countries in the world, or rather the largest economies in the world. I differentiate between richest countries in the world and largest economies in the world because these two phrases are not in fact the same thing. When you compare our two lists, which divides the population of the country into the GDP, you see something astounding. Only one country is on both lists, the US, and the US barely makes the list of GDP per capita at number 10, whereas it was number 1 in the GDP list. This illustrates an excellent point when talking about the largest economy in the world, the richest country in the world, and so many other ways you can describe countries by economic indicators. The short answer: the variable you choose to measure economic success, economic development, directly affects your results for which countries are on those lists and where on those lists the countries fall. China has the second largest economy in the world, but it has a massive population, and large portions of their population still live in poverty. There is a huge issue of income inequality in the country, an issue you'd never know just by looking at GDP. And in reality, looking at any one variable for 1 year, for one country, tells you almost nothing about the country. If you want to really learn about a country, you have to look at variables over time. You look for change and patterns of growth or of decline. And you have to compare it to other countries across the globe to see where each country fits in. It's all about comparative perspective. And you use multiple measures and variables, which we'll cover each week.